as 1958, frames the Gnostic path as one of awakening to this inner divinity. Salvation soteria is achieved through gnosis, a revelatory knowledge that acts as a key to unlock the pneumatic prisoner from its material cell. While this model is textually supported, it is philosophically insufficient and spiritually sedative. It promotes a passive soteriology where the human subject is merely a vessel, a treasure chest whose value is determined by its content, not its character. The spark is something one has, not something one does. This reduces the spiritual path to a mere recognition, an intellectual ascent to a pre-existing condition. This fosters a dangerous spiritual elitism, a pneumatic aristocracy where salvation is a birthright, not an achievement. In this static model, the pneumatic individual need not strive, grow, or transform. They need only realize their inherent superiority and wait for gnosis to deliver them. Such a framework fails to account for the transformative, often agonizing, nature of genuine spiritual praxis. It cannot explain the vast experiential gulf between two individuals who both, in theory, possess a spark. Consider two brothers, both deemed pneumatics. One comfortable in the knowledge of his innate divinity, may descend into a profound nihilism, viewing his worldly actions as meaningless before the foregone conclusion of his salvation. The other, however, might feel an urgent, burning imperative to transmute his very being into something worthy of that inner spark. The passive model offers no mechanism to explain this divergence. It renders spiritual discipline and moral effort entirely superfluous. The spark, if it is merely a static inheritance, becomes a point of ontological pride rather than a call to existential action. It is a fleeting and ultimately useless notion unless it becomes the catalyst for a radical metamorphosis. To the alchemical imperative, the combustion of the psyche, this paper posits that the spark is not the divine presence itself, but rather divine potential. It is the universe's initial investment, a seed of fire that remains dormant without fuel and friction. The critical, and often ignored, process is the conscious act of combustion. This is not a gentle awakening, but a violent, volitional alchemy where the soul's psyche offers itself up as the fuel for its own divine spark. This process is the soul's direct rebellion against the archontic powers that govern the material realm. As those powers thrive on psychological stasis and the preservation of the ego, the entirety of one's psychic life, the accumulated experiences, traumas, desires, and attachments that constitute the narrative self becomes the substance fed into the furnace. Every memory becomes kindling, every longing, of flammable oil, every moment of profound suffering, the immense pressure needed to intensify their reaction. The spark is the catalyst that, when fanned by will and intention, begins to consume the lower mundane aspects of the self. This is the Gnostic parallel to the alchemical calcinatio, the purification by fire which burns away all that is not essential, leaving only the purified essence. It is here, in this internal forge, that the demiurge's influence is most acutely felt. The archons whisper temptations to preserve the fuel, to cling to cherished memories, to nurse old wounds, to define oneself by past traumas. They offer the comfort of the known ego in exchange for the terrifying uncertainty of the fire. This process, therefore, is inherently active and profoundly dangerous. It is a conscious choice to engage in the painful work of self-confrontation, to sacrifice the comfortable ego on the altar of the transcendent self. An uncontrolled combustion, undertaken without sufficient will or wisdom, can lead not to illumination but to madness, a psychic immolation that leaves the soul as ash. A soul that guards its psychic fuel, that heeds the archons and refuses to be consumed by the fire, will die with its spark intact, but unignited, a promise of divinity that was never fulfilled. 3. The true flame, reintegrating heat with light. The success of pneumatic combustion is measured by its output. The resulting flame, the mark of the truly realized soul, is characterized by two essential and inseparable properties: light and heat. Traditional Gnostic exegesis focuses almost exclusively on light. This is gnosis, illumination, consciousness, the perception of truth. It is the radical reorientation of perception that allows one to see beyond the veil of material illusion, to recognize the cosmos as a foreign prison rather than a home. It is the ability to decode the systems of control, social, political, religious, as crude mechanisms of the demiurge. Our model fully incorporates this as a necessary product of the flame. Without light, any action is blind, and any rebellion is futile. However, a flame that produces only light is a cold and sterile phenomenon. The critical and heretofore neglected product is heat. Heat represents agency, praxis, will, and the power to effect change. It is the radiative, transformative energy that a truly awakened soul emanates. While light perceives reality, heat alters it. A soul that produces heat does not simply understand its separation from the demiurgic world. It actively works to dismantle that world's influence. both internally and externally. Internally, this heat is the alchemical fire that transmutes base emotions. Fear is not simply recognized as an illusion light, but is actively metabolized into courage heat. Externally, this soul becomes a point of pleramatic infection in the world. It creates art that awakens, speaks truth that disrupts, and embodies a radical freedom that serves as a beacon, helping to ignite the dormant sparks in others. A gnosis without this heat is mere intellectualism. It creates the cold Gnostic, a spiritual connoisseur who collects esoteric data and observes the world suffering with a detached sense of superiority. This figure is a prisoner who can describe the exact dimensions of their cell and the chemical composition of its bars, but lacks the fiery will to melt them. Meaning is therefore found not in the potential for light the spark, but in the actualized radiation of both light and heat the flame. For conclusion, in new soteriology of agency, the theory of pneumatic combustion reframes Gnostic soteriology from a passive narrative of recovery to an active drama of creation. The divine spark is not a guarantee of salvation, but an existential imperative, a challenge issued to the soul. To possess a spark is to be handed a match. It is a meaningless gesture, unless one is willing to strike it against the rough surface of one's own being. This act is the ultimate rebellion against the stasis imposed by the demiurge. By shifting the locus of meaning from the possession of the spark to the process of its combustion, we center human agency as the decisive factor in the spiritual path. The goal is not merely to be liberated, but to become a liberating force. This has cosmic implications. Each soul that achieves the flame is not just saving itself, it is actively participating in the restoration of the pleroma, reclaiming a quantum of divine energy, both light and heat, from the clutches of the kinoma. The ultimate expression of the divine is not a rescued fragment of light, but a self-generated, self-sustaining fire that provides both illumination for the mind and transformative heat for the will. It is only the soul whose spark has combusted into such a flame that is meaningful at all, for it has ceased to be a subject of a divine drama and has become its active and radiant co-author. Works cited: Jonah's Hands, The Gnostic Religion, The Message of the Alien God, and The Beginning